Hi, folks. Happy Friday. I figured why not finish the week with yet another live stream because, you haven't seen enough of my face. So, today I wanted to run quickly through sort of the alignment of business goals with technical innovation when building products, platforms, services, especially as a consultant, but also, as an employee of a business as well. And why do I think it's important to talk about this? Quite often, it feels easier to sort of go it alone, develop in a silo, and then unveil the results to the business. And what this ends up doing is creating a huge disconnect between what the business actually wants and what you're going to end up building. And I don't mean this as a singular, I mean like as a team. Quite often, it's easy to say, "Oh, we'll just go and build it, and then we'll show you, what you want at the far end." And then from that, there's a whole bunch of miscommunication, and the wrong thing gets built. Equally, the business feels business owners, business users, I use the business as an overreaching term for the consumers on an internal product, feel disconnected, feel like they're not involved, feel like they don't have a say in the way stuff works. And so they don't pay enough attention because they're like, yeah, whatever. And they don't feel bought into the process when they should do because they're the ones who are going to be consuming the product at the end anyway. So, what is important when it comes to building out a product, and how do you interact with a business to allow for that collaboration to happen to ensure that what you build is suitable for the end users? Because that's a completely different way of building than building a product for external customers, because you've probably got a reasonably good definition of what your external customers are. Your internal customers quite often are not the same. So here's some thoughts. Aligning business and technical goals. It might seem obvious, but it also takes a fair amount of working out and discussing and communicating to ensure that the product aligns with the overall business strategy, and what you build suits the business is an obvious but reasonably crucial starting point. The amount of products or projects I've been involved in where we built something and then the business goes, well, it doesn't do what I want. And that's not because it's been deliberately built wrong. It's that the requirements haven't been communicated effectively in the first place. So consider that sort of point number one. Number two, understanding the customer slash end user perspective. And if a business user can't explain why they want something or how they want it, then you have to be able to dig deeper. You can't just go, oh, okay, I know what I'm going to build, and it's fine. There has to be a good degree of understanding as to what the customer slash end user is going to do, what their pain points are, what issues they face currently with their current workflow, to ensure that the features that you build, especially up front, because you're probably going to like MVP it to start with, actually make sense from a product development perspective, a technical perspective, an implementation perspective, an interaction perspective. They're all key because you could build the most effective data platform on the planet, but if those interactions don't work or the friction is too high, then people don't use the software, and then what's the point? The other big one that I felt was important was like bridging the gap between technical jargon and business speak. Over the years, I feel like I do a reasonably good job. I suspect some people will probably get in the comments and tell me otherwise, but like When I deal with business users, I try my best to like not dumb it down, but adjust the terminology and the phrasing that I use to ensure that they feel comfortable in what I'm saying and how I'm explaining stuff, so it makes sense to them. Because like if I go and talk to a bunch of techies, the way that I interact with those is vastly different because they understand a different set of technologies, toolings, ways of working, and ways of communication that non-technical people do not necessarily know, understand. And so you have to be able to pitch that differently, but explain the same stuff in multiple ways. And so, the understanding goes both ways, and you have to be able to make sure that you pitch and explain your stuff correctly so that both sides of the development lifecycle can understand. Another thing that's important, because it's often overlooked, but what does success look like? If there's often misunderstandings between what is a finished product, what is an MVP, what is a piece of software that is ready for end users versus internal testing, all that type of stuff, because that massively affects your timeline and expectations in the business and people going to sell stuff to other customers or end users or whatever. And so, like, what does success look like? Is success a fully working, fully fleshed out platform? Is success and completion a MVP that allows people to log in and do the first set of operations, and then there's more coming later? Everybody has to be aligned with that. It's super important that everybody is aligned with that, because if you are not, then the there'll be arguments basically, and I've been on enough of them, like where the success metrics have not been defined and those criteria are not sorted and aligned, and then there's obviously a misunderstanding, and the way that a finished product is finished is wildly different between the business users and the technical developers. The other side of that, though, of course, is then how do you deal with prioritization of new features, feedback loops, and the communication that comes back, especially once you've got like an MVP shipped. Like once you've got the first version of your software, ready for people to look at, how do you prioritize the next features or the completion, fixing of other stuff, and so on and so on. And so prioritization, feedback loops, but also those communication methods so that things don't get lost in the cracks. There isn't an email that got sent last thing on a Friday night that by Tuesday morning, because it's a long weekend, you've forgotten about, and all that type of stuff. So how do you track stuff? How do you feedback, both through the application that you've built, through tickets and issues that come in, emails, all that type of stuff? It's all important and all needs to be figured out so that the business feels like it's being listened to, and you feel like you're getting the feedback that you require from the business to be able to build what you need to be able to build. So yeah, feedback loops, always important and often overlooked. Another big thing that I enjoy doing is building in quite a transparent manner. Like there's a lot of communication. I often feel like bad because I feel like I over communicate. Like I stick regular updates into business owner channels rather than like just talking on the tech side, because I feel like when you're offering up, when you're building something new, like making sure that the business understands where you are in that build process, that delivery process, is important. And so, oversharing, but being super transparent, like can often help mitigate like the communication breakdown and the lack of understanding or expectations earlier, if there is one, because you've shared early rather than hiding everything until the end. So I'd rather build in the open. If I could build everything in an open source way, I'd probably do it, because that way, like, literally everyone can see it. At least, like, internally in the business, oversharing, sharing screenshots, progress, updates on a regular basis, um, builds trust between your team and the business feels like it's being included in what's going on rather than it's a silo or some firewalled area. Um, from a team culture and build out perspective, like I like to foster a culture of continuous improvement, and there's collaboration and customer feedback and development lifecycle stuff sort of allows you to deal with that improvement aspect. And so, like, internally as a team, how can we communicate better? How can we build stuff better? How can we use technology better? How can we interact with the customers better? How can we deal with accessibility better? It all adds up. And so, as a team, and that comes both from the business side, like how can they define requirements better? How as a team can we build to those requirements better? How can we track things better? Like, it's never perfect. And there's always ways to be able to improve those feedback loops, mechanisms, code building, delivery, all that type of stuff. And so, like, continuously improving your methods, your business methods, your working methods is something that is definitely useful. The other reason to keep people in the loop is that, like, you can mitigate risks early, because if you show whatever you're building to internal stakeholders, there's a large chance that they're going to understand if it's an external product, like what the market looks like, but also like if it's an internal product, what the consumers of the product internally in your organization are going to expect. And so if you end up going down the wrong path as a developer and you haven't shown anybody and you haven't discussed it properly, there's clearly going to be a large chance of going the wrong way. And so by showing stakeholders and people who have knowledge and experience in a certain sector, you can mitigate that risk early and alleviate like problems further down the line, which goes to a lot of the other stuff we've said about continuous improvement, feedback loops, communication. It's such a big thing. Communication inside of an organization is such a big thing across domains. Like, I've been in enough places where they think that, like, the tech team does tech stuff, the business team does business stuff, the sales team does sales stuff, but it doesn't work, not in the long term. It doesn't scale well, and it wastes a lot of money. On the team front, the other thing as well that's important is to celebrate those wins. Like, when you build some software, when you ship some software, make sure that the organization knows about it, make sure the business knows about it, make sure the salespeople know about it, make sure that the tech team feel valued in shipping that software, so that the business can continue doing what it's wanting to do. And so, like, it's a morale boosting exercise to ship a release and then celebrate that release that you have shipped amongst the team. And so, like, make sure that everyone feels like they are part of something, rather than like, oh, thank God that shipped, now we'll let the sales team go and deal with it or whatever. Like, celebrate those wins and make sure that everybody across the organization feels like they've actually contributed something to this project, because, like, making people feel valued and part of something is a massive part of, like, team cohesion, workforce efficiency, retaining staff. At the end of the day, retaining staff is obviously an important thing, and if they feel like they're bought into something, it's probably a good thing. Finally, on the list of, like, stuff that's important for communication and collaboration is the use of the correct tooling, the road mapping sessions, the meetups, the design stuff, all the things that go before, during, and after. Like, so, before you kick off, make sure that the business goals and deliverables are well defined, documented, signed off by business users, and they've actually spent some time looking at them, rather than just like, yeah, it looks fine. Because you want to be able to hold those business users accountable if you build the wrong thing and it's been signed off, because it does it does definitely happen. So like, make sure that the business is bought into the way that the software development process works, because it is different to general day-to-day operations of stuff. When you start building things as a tech team, ensure that there's regular stand-ups, but also make sure that other people in the business have exposure to those stand-ups, understand what's going on, understand where you are in the process, understand the goals, the milestones, the epics, the stories. Like, business leaders don't need to understand it in the same level of detail as the developers, but they could do with knowing what's going on. So ensuring that you've got stuff like Jira, you've got Slack or Teams to communicate effectively across business units and put people in the right channels. That's important stuff. And those collaboration tools and road mapping sessions, you want to get right at the start, because trying to like backfill your business processes halfway through a project because you haven't actually thought about the design properly and or got it signed off by the business will cause a whole heap of problems. So, there's 10 ideas for like cross-team communication and collaboration that I feel like is important on a day-to-day basis. Because that type of stuff will end up causing you grief down the line. And that's that. So I hope you found this useful. It appears that the LinkedIn title has failed to update. So if people are wondering why this is a data modeling thing, I'm talking about products, blaming streaming software. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you have a lovely rest of your Friday. And for those of you who have Saturday and Sunday off, have a lovely weekend. I'll be back next week, I'm sure, with some more ramblings and probably a proper vlog at some point, but I quite enjoy talking to the camera. For those of you who have questions, comments, and feedback, leave them below. I will get back to you, or spur another live chat /vlog. In the meantime, goodbye for now.